welcome to another chapter of reading. My mom enjoyed her birthday, and especially her birthday present from me. I love you, Mom. And because of what today's chapter details, I have a little surprise that I wanted to do when I was doing Sorcerer's Stone, but after I did the quarter chapter, I was like, oh crap, I forgot it. So, hopefully you enjoy the surprise that was meant for that chapter in this chapter. But anyway, let's get on with the chapter, shall we? We're in for a little bit of a lengthy one. Chapter 18. The Weighing of the Wands. When Harry woke up on Sunday morning, well, it's technically Thursday evening, but make it that way, though. It took him a moment to remember why he felt so miserable and worried. Then the memory of the previous night rolled over him. He sat up and ripped back the curtains of his own four-poster, intending to talk to Ron, to force Ron to leave him, only to find that Ron's bed was empty. He had obviously gone down to breakfast. Poor Harry. Harry dressed and went down the spiral staircase into the common room. The moment he appeared, the people who had already finished breakfast broke into applause again. The prospect of going down into the great hall and facing the rest of the Gryffindors, all treating him like some sort of hero, was not inviting. It was that, however, or stay here and allow himself to be cornered by the Creevy brothers, who were both beckoning frantically into joining them. He walked resolutely over the portrait hole, pushed it open, climbed out of it, and found himself face to face with Hermione. Honestly, if I were in that situation, I would have just stayed in the dorm room. But that's just me. Hello, she said, holding up the stack of toast which she was carrying on in a napkin. I brought you this. Want to go for a walk? Good idea, said Harry gratefully. They went downstairs, crossed the entrance hall quickly without looking in at the great hall, and were soon striding across the lawn toward the lake, where the Durmstrang ship was moored, reflected blackly in the water. It was a chilly morning, and they kept moving, munching on their toast. As Harry told Hermione exactly what happened after he had left the Gryffindor table the night before. To his immense relief, Hermione accepted his story without question. Thank you, Hermione. I'm glad to know I'm not the only one who believes Harry. Of course I knew you hadn't entered yourself, she said when he'd finished telling her about the scene in the chamber off the hall. The look on your face when Dumbledore read out your name. But the question is, who did put it in? Because Moody's right, Harry. I don't think any student could have done it. They'd never be able to pull the goblet or get over Dumbledore's... Have you seen Ron? Harry interrupted. Hermione hesitated. Yes. He was at breakfast, she said. Does he still think I entered myself? No, I don't think so. Really? Said Hermione awkwardly. What's that supposed to mean, not really? Oh, Harry, isn't it obvious? Hermione said. He's jealous, Hermione said despairingly. Jealous? Harry said incredulously. Jealous of what? He wants to make a prat of himself in front of the whole school, does he? Look, said Hermione patiently. It's always you who gets all the attention. You know it is. I know it's not your fault. She added quickly, seeing Harry open his mouth furiously. I know you don't ask for it, but, you know, Ron's got all those brothers to compete against at home. And you're his best friend. You're really famous. He's always shunted to one side whenever people see you, and he puts up with it. But he never mentions it. And I suppose this is just one time too many. Right, said Harry bitterly. Really great. Tell him from me I'll swap any time he wants. Tell him from me he's welcome to it. People gawping at my forehead everywhere I go. Not telling him anything, Hermione said shortly. Tell him yourself. It's the only way he'll sort this out. Not running around after him trying to make him grow up. Harry said so loudly that several owls in a nearby tree took off flight in alarm. Maybe he'll believe I'm not enjoying myself once I've got my neck broken off. It's not funny, Harry, said Hermione quietly. It's not funny at all. She looked extremely anxious. Harry, I've been thinking. You know what we've got to do, don't you? Straight away, the moment we get back to the castle. Yeah, give Ron a good kick up the... Right to Sirius. You've got to tell him what's happened. He asked you to keep him posted on everything that's going on at Hogwarts. It's almost as if he expected something like this to happen. I brought some parchment and a quill out with me. Come off it, said Harry, looking around to check that they couldn't be overheard, but the grounds were quite deserted. He'll probably come back to the country just because my scar twinged. He's probably come rushing right into the castle if I tell him someone entered me in the Traveler tournament. He'd want you to tell him, said Hermione sternly. He's going to find out anyway. How? Harry, this isn't going to be kept quiet, said Hermione very seriously. This tournament's famous, and you're famous. I'll be really surprised if there isn't anything in the Daily Prophet about you competing. It's like foreshadowing to later events. You're already in half the books about you-know-who. You know, and Sirius would rather hear it from you. I know he would. Okay, I'll write to him, said Harry, throwing his last piece of toast into the lake. They both stood and watched it floating there for a moment before a large technical rose out of the water and scooped it beneath the surface. Hogwarts has a kraken? Or something in that family? Why wasn't it seen in the films? That would have been cool! Then they returned to the castle. Oh my goodness. Whose elm am I going to use? Harry said as they climbed the stairs. He told me not to use Hedwig again. Ask Ron if you can borrow... I'm not asking Ron for anything, Harry said flatly. Well, borrow one of the schoolhouse then. Anyone can use them, said Hermione. They went up to the armory. Hermione gave Harry a piece of parchment, a quill, a bottle of ink, and then strolled around the long lines of perches looking at all the different owls. I would do the same. While Harry sat down against a wall and wrote his letter. Dear Sirius, you told me to keep you posted on what's happening at Hogwarts, so here goes. I don't know if you've heard, but the Triwizard Tournament's happening this year, and on Saturday night I got picked as a 4th champion. I don't know who put my name in the Goblet of Fire, because I didn't. The other Hogwarts champion is Cedric Diggory from Hufflepuff. He paused at this point, thinking. He had an urge to say something about the large weight of anxiety that seemed to have settled inside his chest last night, but he couldn't think of how to transcribe this into words. I'd help you there, Harry. I'm a bit of a wordsmith, and quite the logophile. So he didn't simply dipped his quill back into the ink bottle and wrote, "Hope you're okay in Buckbeak. Harry." And this letter is making me think of a point I further introduced. We meet Lupin in Prisoner of Azkaban. I get Sirius is his godfather, but didn't he have that strong bond with Lupin? If I were Harry, I would ask Lupin and Sirius both for advice. What about you guys? Finished, he told Hermione, getting to his feet and brushing straw off his robes. At this, Hedwig came fluttering down onto his shoulder and held out her wedding. Aww, it's second nature to her. I can't use her, Harry told her, looking around for the schoolhouse. Let's use one of these. Hedwig gave a very loud hoot and took off so suddenly that her talons cut into his shoulder. She kept her back to Harry all the time. He was tying his letter to the leg of a large barn owl. When the barn owl had flown off, Harry reached out to stroke Hedwig, but she clicked her beak furiously and soared up to the rafters out of reach. First one, then you, said Harry angrily. This isn't my fault. It isn't, Harry. No, it isn't. And here, another hug for you while I'm thinking of it. If Harry thought that matters would improve once everyone got used to the idea of him being champion, the following day showed him how mistaken he was. He could no longer avoid the rest of the school once he was back at lessons, and it was clear that the rest of the school, just like the Gryffindors, thought Harry had entered himself for the tournament. Unlike the Gryffindors, however, they did not seem impressed. Oh, poor Harry. All of this would be an anxious nightmare for me, but I really commend him for trying his best to at least be a little positive, despite this tough situation. The Hufflepuffs, who were usually on excellent terms with the Gryffindors, had turned remarkably cold toward the whole lot of them. One herbology lesson was enough to demonstrate this. It was plain that the Hufflepuffs felt that Harry had stolen their champion's glory, a feeling exaggerated, perhaps, by the fact that Hufflepuff House rarely got any glory, and that Cedric was one of the few who had ever given them any, having been Gryffindor once at Quidditch. Ernie Macmillan and Justin Finch Fletchley, whom Harry normally got on very well, did not talk to him, even though they were reporting. Getting a little bit ahead of myself there. Repotting. Totally different from reporting, people. I apologize for the mistake. It's been a long day for me. Bouncing bulbs at the same tray. Though they did laugh rather unpleasantly when one of the bouncing bulbs wriggled free from Harry's grip and smacked him hard in the face. Ron wasn't talking to Harry either. Hermione sat between them, making very forced conversation. But though answered her normally, they avoid making eye contact with each other. As someone who struggles with eye contact a lot, I commend them for having the focus to make eye contact with each other to begin with at all. Really. Harry thought even Professor Sprout seemed distant with him, but then she was head of Hufflepuff House. He had been looking forward to seeing Hagrid under normal circumstances, but care of magical creatures meant seeing the Slytherins too. The first time he would come face to face with them since becoming champion. Predictably, Malfoy arrived at Hagrid's cabin with his familiar sneer firmly in place. And look, boys, it's the champion, he said to Crabbe and Goyle the moment he got within earshot of her. Got your autograph books. Better get a signature now, because I doubt he's going to be around much longer. Half the tribes of champions have died. Foreshadowing of sorts. How long do you reckon you're going to last, Potter? 10 minutes into the first test, my bet. Crabbe and Goyle guffawed sycophantically, but Malfoy had to stop there because Hagrid emerged from the back of his cabin bouncing a teetering tower of crates, each containing a very large blasting Scrooge. To the class's horror, Hagrid proceeded to explain that the reason the Scrooge had been ending another was an excess of pent-up energy, and that the solution would be for each student to fix a leash on a screw and take it for a short walk. The only good thing about this plan was that it distracted Malfoy completely. "Take this thing for a walk," he repeated in disgust, staring into one of the boxes. "Where exactly are we supposed to fix the leash? On the sting, the blasting under, or the sucker?" Yeah, this is going to be one of those few moments where I side with Draco on this, because I really don't see any point in leashing a blast-ended Scrooge just to take it for a walk. They don't even have legs. They're not dogs, Hagrid. They're not dogs. I'm sorry, but they're not dogs. Honestly, this is one class I would kind of be happy to have, but kind of not so happy to have if I were to choose it, because it would depend on the animal. And ultimately, I think the cons would outweigh the pros of taking the class, so kind of make of that what you will. Moving on. Wrong in the middle, said Hagrid, demonstrating. You might want to put on your dragon hide gloves, just as an extra precaution, like. That way, you come here and help me with this big one. Hagrid's real intention, however, was to talk to Harry away from the rest of the class. He waited until everyone else had set off with their screws, then turned to Harry and said, very seriously, "So, you're competing, Harry, in the tournament. School champion." "One of the champions," Harry corrected him. Hagrid's beetle-black eyes looked very anxious under his wild eyebrows. "No idea who put you in for it, Harry." "You believe I didn't do it, then?" said Harry, concealing the rush of gratitude he felt at Hagrid's words with difficulty. Again, I'm so glad I'm not the only one who believes Harry. "Of course I do," Hagrid grunted. "You say it wasn't you, and I believe you. And Dumbledore believes you, too." "Wish I knew who did do it," said Harry bitterly. "Well, I know who did it, but you guys, the listeners, do not. So, I am not going to reveal that spoiler just yet. Sorry." The pair of them looked out over the lawn. The class was widely scattered out, and all in great difficulty. The skirts were now over 3 feet long and extremely powerful. No longer shellless and colorless, they had developed a kind of thick, grayish, shiny armor. They looked like a cross between giant scorpions and elongated crabs, but still without recognizable heads or eyes. They had become immensely strong and very hard to control. "Looks like they're having fun, don't they?" said Hagrid happily. It does not sound like it. Harry assumed he was talking about the skirts because his classmates certainly weren't. Every now and then, with an alarming bang, bang! One of the skirt's ends would explode, causing it to shoot forward several yards, and more than one person was being dragged on their stomach, trying desperately to get back on their feet. Ugh, all that mud. No, 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 no. If there's mud around, I'm not gonna be around. I don't know, Harry. Hagrid sighed, suddenly looking back down at him with a worried expression on his face. School champion. Everything seems to happen to you, doesn't it? Harry didn't answer. Yes, everything did seem to happen to him. That was more or less what Hermione said as they had walked around the lake. And that was the reason, according to her, that Ron was no longer talking to him. The next 2 days were some of Harry's worst at Hogwarts. The closest he had ever come to feeling like this had been during those months in his second year, when a large part of the school had suspected him of attacking his fellow students. But Ron had been on his side then. Oh, another hug for Harry. I'd stay by your side no matter what, Harry. I promise. He thought he could have coped with the rest of the school's behavior if he could have just had Ron back as a friend, but he wasn't going to try and persuade Ron to talk to him if Ron didn't want to. Nonetheless, it was lonely with dislike pouring in on him from all sides. Another hug for Harry. Again, I would stick by your side, Harry. No matter what. He could understand the Hufflepuff's attitude. Even if he didn't like it, they had their own champion to support. He expected nothing less than vicious insults from the Slytherins. He was highly unpopular there and always had been, because he helped Gryffindor beat them so often, both at Quidditch and in the Inter-House Championship. But he had hoped the Ravenclaws might have found it in their hearts to support him as much as Cedric. He was wrong, however. Most Ravenclaws seemed to think that he had been desperate to earn himself a bit more fame by tricking the goblet into accepting his name. Oh, another hug for Harry. I wouldn't think that way. Then there was the fact that Cedric looked the part of a champion so much more than he did. Exceptionally handsome with his straight nose, dark hair, and gray eyes. Well, hello. My hair is dark brown in the autumn/winter, and I have gray eyes. Funny how that turns out. Although, I believe beauty comes from within. Moving on. It was hard to say who was receiving more attention these days, Cedric or Victor Crumb. Harry actually saw the same sixth-year girls who had been so keen to get Crumb's autograph, begging Cedric to sign their school bags one lunchtime. Meanwhile, there was no reply from Sirius. Hedwig was refusing to come anywhere near him. Professor Trelawney was predicting his death with even more certainty than usual, and he did so badly at summoning charms in Professor Flitwick's class that he was given extra homework. The only person to get any, apart from Neville. It's really not that difficult, Harry. Hermione tried to reassure him as they left Flitwick's class. She had been making objects zoom across the room to her all lesson, as though she were some sort of weird magnet or doorbuster. Lord Dusters. Not door busters. It's been a long day, okay? Waste paper baskets and lunoscopes. Again, I still think a lunoscope would be very, very useful. Can they be made in the real world, perchance, please? He's just not concentrating properly. Yeah. I have ADHD, so I know what it's like not to concentrate on something fully because my focus is just like, ooh, what's this? Wait, no. What's that? Ooh, what about this? That's how my focus is like. Unless it's something I really, really enjoy doing. Even I get a little distracted from reading to do these commentaries for you. But I'm having fun because I'm giving you my insights, and that means a lot to me to share it with you. Because you may have some similar thoughts, or you may have some different thoughts. But either way, I like to share my thoughts with you guys because it makes me feel more connected to you. Now, what was I going on about? Oh yeah, my lack of focus. But yes, I have ADHD, so I know what it's like not to really concentrate on something. But in a situation like this, I can definitely understand why your focus would be, well, out of balance. You have all of these people who don't believe you for a situation that you somehow get stuck in. And then you have this very select few who do believe you. But from what I'm seeing, they're not really standing up for you. And that kind of sucks, really. If I were in this book, and I would, obviously I'm a Gryffindor, so I'd be with the Gryffindors. I would be with the Gryffindors, but not in the celebratory way. I would be the Gryffindor that believes Harry like Hermione. And rather than just letting them get away with it, I would call them out on it. I really would. Because they're supposed to be his friends. True friends do not act like that. But that's just me. Okay, where were we now? Oh yes. Wonder why that was, said Harry darkly as Cedric Diggory walked past, surrounded by a large group of simpering girls, all of whom who looked at Harry as though he were a particularly large blast-ended screw. Still, never mind, double potions to look forward to this afternoon. Double potions was always a horrible experience, but these days it was nothing short of torture. Being shut in a dungeon for an hour and a half with Snape and the Slytherins, all of whom who seemed determined to punish Harry as much as possible for daring to become school champion, was about the most unpleasant thing Harry could imagine. Oh, and he already goes through so much with the Dursleys. You don't deserve this, Harry. You really don't. He had already struggled through one Friday's worth with Hermione sitting next to him and Tony, ignore them, under her breath, and he couldn't see why today should be any better. When he and Hermione arrived at Snape's dungeon after lunch, they found the Slytherins waiting outside, each and every one of them wearing a large bath. It's been a long day. It's been a really long day. Every one of them wearing a large badge on the front of his or her robes. For one wild moment, Harry thought they were SPEW badges. Then he saw they all bore the same message in luminous red letters that burnt brightly in the dimly lit underground passage. Support Cedric Diggory, the real Hogwarts champion. Like them, Potter, said Malfoy loudly as Harry approached. And this isn't all they do. Look! He peered his badge into his chest, and the message upon it vanished to replace by another one, which glowed green. Potter stinks. No, he doesn't. You do not get away with saying that. Okay, well, I obviously kind of did. But Harry Potter does not stink. If you want to get on my good side, like Harry Potter. If you want to really be on my good side, tell me you're a Potterhead. I'll get along on with you very, very quickly then. Anyhow, the Slytherins howled with laughter. Hey, I can think of a few Slytherins who would not. Each of them pressed their badges too until the message Potter Stinks was shining brightly all around Harry. Another hug for Harry. This chapter is just filled with Harry hugs. He felt the heat rise in his face and neck. Oh, very funny, said Hermione sarcastically to Pansy Parkinson and her gang of Slytherin girls who were laughing harder than anyone. Really witty. Ron was standing against the wall with Dean and Seamus. He wasn't laughing, but he wasn't sticking up for Harry either. This is more or less kind of what I mean by I wish there were more Gryffindors that believed Harry and stood up for him like I would. Moving on. Want one, Granger? Said Malfoy, holding out a badge to Hermione. I've got those, but don't touch my hand now. I've just washed it, you see. Don't want a mud sopping it off. Some of the anger Harry had been feeling for days and days seemed to burst through in his chest. He had reached for his wand before he thought what he was doing. People all round them scrambled out of the way, backing down the corridor. Harry, said Hermione warningly. Go on then, Potter, said Malfoy, partly drawing out his own wand. Moody's not here to look after you now. Do it if you've got the guts. For a split second they looked into each other's eyes. Then at exactly the same time both acted. Fernoculus! Harry yelled. Denocygo! Screamed Malfoy. Jets of light shot from both wands, hit each other in midair, and ricocheted off at angles. Just trying to provide sound effects. Harry hit Goyle in the face, and Malfoy hit Hermione. Goyle bellowed and put his hands up to his nose, where great ugly boils were springing up. Ugh. Not how I anticipate acne going. Definitely not how I anticipate acne going. Hermione, however, was whimpering in panic and clutching her mouth. Hermione! Ron hurried forward to see what was wrong with her. Harry turned and saw Ron dragging Hermione's hand away from her face. It wasn't a pretty sight. Hermione's front teeth, already larger than average, were now growing at an alarming rate. She was looking more and more like a beaver as her teeth elongated. Past her bottom lip, toward her chin. Panic-stricken, she felt them and let out a terrified cry. And what is all this noise about? Said a soft, deadly voice. Snape had arrived. The Slytherins clamored to give their explanations. Snape pointed a long yellow finger at Malfoy and said, Explain. Potter attacked me, sir. We attacked each other at the same time, Harry shouted. And he hit Goyle. Look. Snape examined Goyle, whose face now resembled something that would have been at home in a book on poisonous fungi. I'm sorry, but I'm just trying to imagine poisonous mushrooms and nothing really comes to mind, but it's hilarious. Hospital wind, Goyle, Snape said calmly. Oh, but I got Hermione. Look, Ron said. He forced Hermione to show Snape her teeth. She was doing her best to hide them with her hands, though this was difficult as they had now grown past her collar. Pansy Parkinson and the other Slytherin girls were doubled up with silent giggles, pointing at Hermione from behind Snape's back. Snape looked coldly at Hermione, then said, I see no difference. I hate Snape with a passion. He is not a good teacher, okay? You guys can have your opinions about him all you wish. But in my analyses, of watching the films and reading the books, he is not a good teacher. Like, why is he even on the Hogwarts staff to begin with? It drives me crazy. Moving on. Small rant over. Hermione let out a whimper, her eyes filled with tears. She turned on her heel and ran all the way up the corridor and out of sight. Oh, look for Hermione. It was lucky, perhaps, that both Harry and Ron started shouting at Snape at the same time. Lucky their voices echoed so much in the stone corridor, for in the confused din, it was impossible for him to hear exactly what they were calling him. He got the gist, however. Let's see, he said in his silkiest voice. 50 points from Gryffindor. And detention each for Potter and Weasley. No good inside, or it'll be weeks worth of detentions. Harry's ears were ringing. The injustice of it made him want to curse Snape into 1,000 slimy pieces. Me too, Harry. Me too. He passed Snape, walked with Ron to the back of the dungeon, and slammed his bag down onto the table. Ron was shaking with anger, too. For a moment, it felt as though everything was back to normal between them. But then Ron turned and sat down with Dean and Seamus instead, leaving Harry alone at his table. Hug for Harry. On the other side of the dungeon, Malfoy turned his back on Snape and pressed his badge, smirking. Potter stinks. Again, he does not. Trust me, he does not. Flashed once more across the room. Harry sat there staring at Snape as the lesson began, picturing horrific things happening to him. If only he knew how to do the Cruciatus curse. He'd have Snape flat on his back like that spider, jerking and twitching. Antidote, said Snape, looking around at them all, his cold black eyes glittering unpleasantly. You should have all prepared your recipes now. I want you to brew them carefully, and then we will be selecting someone to test on. Snape's eyes met Harry's, and Harry knew what was coming. Snape was going to poison him. Harry imagined picking up his cauldron and sprinting it to the front of the class, then bringing it down on Snape's greasy head. And then a knock on the dungeon door burst in on Harry's thoughts. It was Colin Creevey. He edged into the room, beaming at Harry, and walked up to Snape's desk at the front of the room. Yes, said Snape curtly. Please, sir, I'm supposed to take Harry Potter upstairs. Snape stared down at his hooked nose at Colin, whose smile faded from his eager face. Potter has another hour of potions to complete, said Snape coldly. He will come upstairs when sir. Mr. Bagman wants him, he said nervously. All the champions have got to go. I think they want to take photographs. Oh, look at that. I kind of foreshadowed. Harry would have given anything he owned to have stopped Colin from saying those last few words. He chanced to have a glance at Ron, but Ron was staring determinedly at the ceiling. Very well. Very well. Snape snapped. Potter, leave your things here. I want you back down here later to test your antidote. Please, sir, he's got to take his things with him, squeaked Colin. All the champions. Very well, said Snape. Oops, said Snape. Potter, take your bag out of my sight. Harry swung his bag over his shoulder, got up, and headed for the door. As he walked through the Slytherin desk, Potter thanks again, not true, flashed at him from every direction. It's amazing, isn't it, Harry? Said Colin, starting to speak the moment Harry had closed the dungeon door behind. Isn't it though? You being champion? Yeah, really amazing, said Harry heavily as they set off toward the steps into the entrance hall. What do they want photos for, Colin? The Deadly Prophet, I think. Again, I foreshadowed that. Great, said Harry dully. Exactly what I need. More publicity. Good luck, said Colin when they had reached the right room. Harry knocked on the door and entered. He was in a fairly small classroom. Most of the desks had been pushed away to the back of the room, leaving a large space in the middle. Three of them, however, had been placed end to end in front of the blackboard and covered with a long length of velvet. 5 chairs had been set behind the velvet-covered desks, and Ludo Bagman was sitting in one of them, talking to a witch Harry had never seen before, who was wearing magenta robes. Oh dear. Victor Crumb was standing moodily in a corner, as usual, not talking to anybody. Cedric and Fleur were in conversation. Fleur looked a good deal happier than Harry had seen her so far. She kept throwing back her head so that her long silver hair caught the light. This is only a small fraction of my own hair. Here's a reminder. A paunchy man holding a large black camera that was smoking slightly was watching Fleur out of the corner of his eye. Bagman suddenly spotted Harry, got up quickly, and bounded forward. Ah, here he is. Champion number 4. In you come, Harry. In you come. Nothing to worry about. It's just the wand weighing ceremony. The rest of the judges will be here in a moment. Wand weighing? Harry repeated nervously. We have to check that your wands are fully functional. No problems, you know, as they are your most important tools in the tasks ahead, said Bagman. The expert's upstairs now with Dumbledore. Then there's going to be a little photo shoot. This is Rita Skeeter. Ugh. He added, gesturing toward the witch. He said, gesturing toward the witch in magenta robes. She's doing a small piece on the tournament for the Deadly Prophet. Maybe not that small, Ludo, said Rita Skeeter, her eyes on Harry. Ugh. If I had to rank the most detestable characters in the franchise, apart from Umbridge, she's number 1. And for very, very good reason. Her hair was set in elaborate and curiously rigid curls that contrasted oddly with her heavy-jawed face. She wore jeweled spectacles, the thick fingers clutching her crocodile skin handbag ended in 2-inch nails painted crimson. Okay, I kind of see what you're going for here, but crimson and magenta are two different colors. Magenta is a type of purple and pink combined, if you will. Crimson, however, is a dark red. Think of, I don't know if you can really tell or not, but think of my bookmark here. That would be crimson. And although these are technically fuchsia, my walls, it could also be seen as magenta in some retrospect. So, as you can tell, they are very two different colors. And I see what you're trying to go for here, but next time, just don't. Just don't, please. Bit of fashion advice for you guys, because, hello, I'm the fashion queen. Just That's My Best Friend movie. She gave me that title. Moving on. I wonder if I could have a little word with Harry before we start, she said to Bagman, but still gazing fixedly at Harry. The youngest champion, you know, to add a bit of colour. Certainly, cried Bagman. That is, if Harry has no objection, said Harry. Lovely, said Rita Skeeter, and in a second her scarlet-taloned fingers had Harry's upper arm in its surprisingly strong grip, and she was steering him out of the room again, opening a nearby door. We don't want to be in there with all that noise, she said. Let's see. Ah, yes, this is nice and cozy. It was a broom cupboard. Harry stared at her. I love how he just says that in the film, though. We're in a broom cupboard. Well, then you should be right at home. Ugh, Rita Skeeter. You're one of those detestable characters. I know I mentioned that already, but it's just like, ugh. Come on, dear. That's right. Lovely, said Rita Skeeter again, perching herself precariously upon an upturned bucket, pushing Harry down into a cardboard box, and closing the door, throwing them into darkness. Let's see now. She unsnapped her crocodile skin handbag and pulled out a handful of candles, which she lit with a wave of her wand and magicked into midair, so that they could see what they were doing. You won't mind, Harry, if I use a quill? It leaves me free to talk to you normally. Oh, I hate that quill with a passion. I really hate that quill with a passion. What? Said Harry. Rita Skeeter's smile widened. Harry counted 3 gold teeth. She reached again into her crocodile bag and drew out a long acid. Oh, oh, oh. The green you used in the films was much nicer. Oh. Acid green quill. And a roll of parchment, which she stretched out between them on a crate of Mrs. Scour's all-purpose magical mess remover. Sounds like magical laundry detergent. I'm sorry, it had to be said. She put the tip of the green quill into her mouth, sucked it for a moment with apparent relish, then placed it upright on the parchment where it stood balanced on its point, quivering slightly. Testing. My name is Rita Skeeter. Daddy Portrait Report. Harry looked down quickly at the quill. The moment Rita Skeeter had spoken, the green quill had started to scribble, skidding across the parchment. Attractive blonde Rita Skeeter, 43, whose savage quill has punctured many inflated reputations. And there's a reason why I don't like that quill. Lovely, said Skeeter yet again. And she ripped the top piece of parchment off, crumpled it up, and stuffed it into her handbag. Now she winked toward Harry and said, "So, Harry, what made you decide to enter the Triwizard Tournament?" Said Harry again, but he was distracted by the quill. Honestly, I would take the quill and break it. What about you guys? Even though he wasn't speaking, it was dashing across the parchment, and in its wake he could make out a fresh sentence. An ugly scar, souvenir of a tragic past, disfigures the otherwise charming face of Harry Potter with lies. "Ignore the quill, Harry," said Rita Skeeter firmly. Reluctantly, Harry looked up at her and said, "Now, why did you decide to enter the tournament, Harry?" "I didn't," said Harry. "I don't know how my name got into the Goblet of Fire. I didn't put it in there." Rita Skeeter raised one heavily penciled eyebrow. Best I can do. "Come now, Harry, there's no need to be scared. There's no need to be scared of getting into trouble. We all know you shouldn't really have entered at all. But don't worry about that. Our readers love a rebel." I hope I'm giving her enough flair to bring her character to life. Her voice is a little hard to imitate. "But I didn't enter," Harry repeated. "I don't know who." "How do you feel about the task ahead?" said Rita Skeeter. "Excited? Nervous?" "I haven't really thought. Yeah, nervous, I suppose," said Harry. His insides squirmed uncomfortably as he spoke. "Champions have died in the past, haven't they?" "Foreshadowing yet again," said Rita Skeeter briskly. "Have you thought about that at all?" "Well, they say it's going to be a lot safer this year." "Yeah, I really doubt that. And you can take that as foreshadowing," said Harry. The quill whizzed across the parchment between them, back and forward as though it were skating. "Of course. You've looked death in the face before, haven't you?" said Rita Skeeter, watching him closely. "How would you say that's affected you?" Said Harry again. "Do you think that the trauma in your past might have made you keen to prove yourself, to live up to your name? Do you think that perhaps you were tempted to enter the Triwizard Tournament because—" "I didn't enter," said Harry, starting to feel irritated. "Can you remember your parents at all?" said Rita Skeeter, talking over him. "No," said Harry. "How do you think they'd feel if they knew you were competing in the Triwizard Tournament? Proud? Worried? Angry?" "Honestly, I think they would be a little worried. Because I feel like they would believe Harry for not putting his name in. I mean, I know family is strong, obviously, but let's be a little realistic here. If I were Lily Potter the First, I would be worried about my son in this potentially dangerous new environment. What about you guys? Moving on. Harry was really feeling ignored. It's been a long day. Harry was really feeling annoyed now. How on earth was he to know how his parents would feel if they were alive? He could feel Rita Skeeter watching him very intently. Frowning, he avoided her gaze and looked down at the words the quill had just written. Tears filled those startling green eyes as her conversation turns to the parents he can barely remember. "I have not got tears in my eyes," said Harry wildly. Before Rita Skeeter could say a word, the door of the broom cupboard was pulled open. Harry looked around, blinking in the bright light. Albus Dumbledore stood there, looking down at both of them, squashed into the cupboard. "Dumbledore!" cried Rita Skeeter with every appearance of delight. But Harry noticed that her quote parchment had suddenly vanished from the box of magical mess remover, and Rita's clawed fingers were hastily snapping shut the clasps of her crocodile skin bag. "How are you?" she said, standing up and holding out one of her large mannish hands to Dumbledore. "I hope you saw my piece over the summer about the International Confederations of the Wizards Conference." "Enchantingly nasty," said Dumbledore, his eyes twinkling. "I particularly enjoyed your description of me as an obsolete dingbat." Rita Skeeter didn't look remotely abashed. "I was just making to the point that some of your ideas are a little old-fashioned, Dumbledore, and that many wizards in the streets—" "I will be delighted to hear the reasoning behind the rudeness, Rita," said Dumbledore, with a courteous bow and smile. "But I am afraid we will have to discuss the matter later. The weighing of the wands is about to start, and it cannot take place if one of our champions is hidden in a broom cupboard." Very glad to get away from Rita Skeeter. Yeah, I would feel the same way, honestly. After I would break that quick quotes quill. Try saying that 3 times fast. I dare you. Harry hurried back into the room. The other champions were now sitting in chairs near the door, and he sat down quickly next to Cedric, looking up at the velvet-covered table where 4 of the 5 judges were now sitting: Professor Karkaroff, Madame Maxime, Mr. Crouch, and Ludo Bagman. Rita Skeeter settled herself down in a corner. Harry saw her slip the parchment out of her bag again, spread it on her knee, suck the end of the quick quotes quill, and place it once more on the parchment. "May I introduce Mr. Ollivander?" said Dumbledore, taking his place at the judges' table and talking to the champions. "He will be checking your wands to ensure that they are in good condition before the tournament." Harry looked around, and with a jolt of surprise he saw an old wizard with large pale eyes standing quietly by the window. Harry had met Mr. Ollivander before. He was the wand maker from whom Harry had bought his own wand over 3 years ago in Diagon Alley. "Mademoiselle Delacour, could we have you first, please?" said Mr. Ollivander, stepping into the empty space in the middle of the room. Poor Delacour swept over to Mr. Ollivander and handed him her wand. He said. He twirled the wand between his long fingers like a baton, and it emitted a number of pink and gold sparks. Then he held it close to his eyes and examined it carefully. "Yes," he said quietly, 9.5 inches, and flexible. Rosewood, containing, dear me, an air from the head of Avila," said her, "one of my grandmares." Okay, I know the dialogue technically says one of my grandmothers, but grandmère is how you say grandmother in French. So I figured I'd show a little more French on behalf of Fleur by replacing that with grandmère. I hope that makes sense. So Fleur was part of Viva, thought Harry, making a mental note to tell Ron. Then he remembered that Ron wasn't speaking to him. "Yes," said Mr. Olban. "Yes, I've never used Vila Heron myself, of course. I find it makes for rather temperamental wands. However, to each their own, and if this suits you—" Mr. Ollivander ran his fingers along the wand, apparently checking it for scratches or bumps. Then he muttered, "Orchideous!" and a bunch of flowers burst from the wand tip. Very well. It's in fine working order," said Mr. Ollivander, scooping up the flowers and handing them to Fleur with her wand. "Mr. Diggory, you next." Fleur glided back to her seat, smiling at Cedric as he passed her. "Ah, now this is one of mine, isn't it?" said Mr. Ollivander with much more enthusiasm, as Cedric handed over his wand. "Yes, I remember it well, containing a single hat from the tail of a particularly fine male unicorn. Must have been 17 heads. Nearly gored me with his horn after I plucked his tail. 12 1/4 inches, ash, pleasantly springy. It's in fine condition. You treat it regularly?" "Polished it last night," said Cedric, grinning. Harry looked down at his own wand. He could see finger marks all over it. He gathered a fistful of rope from his knee and tried to rub it clean surreptitiously. Several gold sparks shot out of the end of it. I mean, what would you expect? Lord Delacour gave him a very patronizing look, and he desisted. Mr. Ollivander sent a stream of silver smoke rings across the room from the tip of Cedric's wand, pronounced himself satisfied, and then said, "Mr. Crumb, if you please." Victor Crumb got up and slouched round-shouldered and left-footed toward Mr. Ollivander. He thrust out his wand and stood scowling with his hands in the pockets of his robes. Said Mr. Ollivander. "This is a Gregorovitch creation, unless I'm much mistaken. A blind wand maker, though the styling is never quite what I... However..." He lifted the wand and examined it minutely, turning it over and over before his eyes. "Yes, hornbeam and dragon heartstring," he shot at Crumb, who nodded. "Rather thicker than one usually sees. Quite frigid. 10 1/4 inches. Ah, this!" The hornbeam went off a blast like a gun. Pow! And a number of small twittering birds flew out at the end and through the open window in the watery sunlight. "Good," said Mr. Ollivander, handing Crumb back his wand, "which leaves Mr. Potter." Harry got to his feet and walked past Crumb to Mr. Ollivander. He handed over his wand. "And here is my Harry wand." I wanted to show it when I did the proper chapter for it, but what do you guys think? Swish and flick. Little callback to Sorcerer's Stone, but I hope you enjoyed it nonetheless. Yes, yes, said Mr. Ollivander, his pale eyes suddenly gleaming. Yes, yes, yes. How well I remember. Harry could remember too. He could remember it as though it had happened yesterday. 4 summers ago, on his 11th birthday, he had entered Mr. Ollivander's shop with Hagrid to buy a wand. Mr. Ollivander had taken his measurements and then started handing him wands to try. Harry had waved what felt like every wand in the shop until at last he had found the one that suited him. And this one, which was made of holly, 11 inches long, and contained a single feather from the tail of the phoenix. Mr. Ollivander had been very surprised that Harry had been so compatible with this wand. "Curious," he said. "Curious." And not until Harry asked what was curious had Mr. Ollivander explained that the phoenix feather in Harry's wand had come from the same bird that supplied the core of Lord Voldemort's. Harry had never shared this piece of information with anybody. He was very fond of his wand, and as far as he was concerned, its relation to Voldemort's wand was something it couldn't help. Rather, as he couldn't help being related to Petunia. Well, I guess that's one way to look at it. I mean, honestly, I couldn't help being related to the idiot who shares half my chromosomes, unfortunately. I managed to escape from all that, thank goodness. However, he really hoped that Mr. Ollivander wasn't about to tell the room about it. He had a funny feeling Rita Skeeter's quick, quote, quill might just explode with excitement if he did. Yet another reason why I would have wanted to take that quill and break it. It's rather intrusive. Mr. Ollivander spent much longer examining Harry's wand than anyone else's. Eventually, however, he made a fountain of water shoot out of it, and handed it back to Harry, announcing that it was still in perfect condition. "Thank you all," said Dumbledore, standing up at the judges' table. "You may go back to your lessons now, or perhaps it would be quicker to just go down to dinner, as they are about to end." Feeling that at last something had gone right today, Harry got up to leave, but the man with the black camera jumped up and cleared his throat. "Photos, Dumbledore, photos!" cried Bagman excitedly. "All the judges and champions. What do you think, Rita?" "Oh, yes, let's do those fast," said Rita Skeeter, whose eyes were upon Harry again. "And then perhaps some individual shots. The photographs took a long time. Oof, I would not vote well. I really wouldn't." Madame Maxime cast everyone else into shadow wherever she stood, and the photographer couldn't stand far enough back to get her into the frame. Eventually, she had to sit while everyone else stood around her. Karkaroff kept twirling his goatee around his finger to give it an extra curl. Crumb, whom Harry would have thought would have been used to this sort of thing, sulked half hidden at the back of the group. The photographer seemed keenest to get forward at the front, but Rita Skeeter kept hurrying forward and dragging Harry into greater prominence. Then she insisted on separate shots of all the champions. At last, they were free to go. Harry went down to dinner. Hermione wasn't there. He supposed she was still in the hospital and having her teeth fixed. He ate alone at the end of the table, then returned to Gryffindor Tower, thinking of all the extra work on summoning charms that he had to do. Up in the dormitory, he came across Ron. "You've had an owl," said Ron briskly the moment he walked in. He was pointing at Harry's pill. The school barn owl was waiting for him there. "Oh, right," said Harry. "And we've got our detentions tomorrow night. Snape's dungeon," said Ron. He then walked straight out of the room, not looking at Harry. For a moment, Harry considered going after him. He wasn't quite sure whether he wanted to talk to him or hit him. Both seemed quite appealing. I would choose talking to him. But the more serious answer was too strong. Harry strode over to the barn owl, took the letter off its leg, and unrolled it. "Harry, I can't say everything I'd like to in a letter. It's too risky in case the owl is intercepted. We need to talk face to face. Can you assure that you are alone by the fire in Gryffindor Tower at 1 o'clock in the morning on the 22nd of November? I know better than anyone that you can look after yourself. And while you're around Dumbledore and Moody, I don't think anyone will be able to hurt you. However, someone seems to be having a good try. Entering you in that tournament would have been very risky, especially right under Dumbledore's nose. Be on the watch, Harry. I still want to hear about anything unusual. Let me know about the 22nd of November as quickly as you can. Sirius." And that is the end of this very lengthy chapter. That probably takes the cake for the longest chapter now, in which case I apologize. But join me next week for Chapter 19, The Hungarian Horntail. Until then, bye!